Hey guys, tonight we're drifting back to a world before electric lights, before the constant hum of traffic, before the glow of screens kept us company in the dark. We're going to the banks of the Nile, but not under the blistering sun you might imagine. No, we're visiting in the deep, velvet night. The kind of night where the sky isn't just black, it's a profound, star-dusted indigo, and the air is warm but carries a whisper of coolness from the great river itself. You can smell it. Damp earth, green papyrus, a faint, sweet floral note from night-blooming water lilies. It's quiet, but not silent. You hear the rhythmic chirp of crickets, the distant, plaintive call of a heron, the gentle, liquid lap of water against the mud-brick walls of a village. This is when ancient Egypt truly breathed, when the desert heat relinquished its grip and life unfolded in the shadows. And your modern sensibilities, so accustomed to flipping a switch for instant illumination, would be utterly useless here. You'd be fumbling in the dark, probably tripping over a sleeping goat or walking straight into a date palm. You'd last about 5 minutes before you started begging for a flashlight or, better yet, a time machine back to your Wi-Fi and central air. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from tonight. Drop a comment with your city and the local time. It's always fascinating to see our little community of history dreamers sprawled across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not a tourist here. You're not even really you in the way you understand it. You're a presence, a quiet observer floating on the night breeze. You glide past the great, hulking silhouettes of temples, their massive pylons black cutouts against the starry sky. They look less like buildings and more like dormant mountains, holding their breath until dawn. But we're not going to the grand procession avenues tonight. We're slipping into the narrower, winding streets of a town, maybe Thebes, maybe Memphis. The houses are packed close, their walls made of sun-dried mud brick that still radiates a gentle, residual warmth. You can feel it as you pass, like the skin of a sleeping animal. Your sandaled feet, because you have sandaled feet now, pad softly on the packed earth. There's a scent of charcoal smoke and baking bread lingering from the evening meal, mixed with the ever-present, not unpleasant smell of livestock and human industry. This is the hour for secrets, for whispered conversations in courtyards, for stolen moments. And as you round a corner, you see it. A pair of eyes. Not human eyes. They catch the faint starlight and reflect it back as two perfect, luminous discs of cool green fire. They're suspended in the inky black of an alleyway, unmoving, watching you. There's no fear in that gaze, only a calm, ancient assessment. You hear the faintest rustle, and the eyes blink slowly, then vanish. A shadow, sleeker and more fluid than any human shadow, detaches itself from the gloom and slinks along a wall, its tail a graceful question mark against the lighter plaster. It pauses, looks back at you once more, and then leaps soundlessly onto a low roof, disappearing into the thatch. That, right there, is the heart of our story. That fleeting, silent encounter. To you and me, it's a cat. A cute, possibly aloof, furry roommate who knocks things off counters. To the person whose sandals you're borrowing in 1200 BCE, that creature is something else entirely. It is a piece of the divine walking on silent paws. It is a protector, a symbol of the sun's benevolent warmth and the moon's mysterious coolness. It is the favored earthly vessel of a goddess. The ancient Egyptians didn't just like cats. They saw the universe reflected in their slitted pupils. They built one of the most complex, enduring, and at times bizarre spiritual relationships in history around them. And tonight, we're going to explore exactly why. We'll trace their paw prints from the humble granary to the glittering throne room, from the bustling docks to the silent depths of the tomb. But we start here, in this quiet street. Because before there were temples and priests and millions of mummies, there was simply this. A human, standing in the profound dark of a prehistoric night, watching a small, efficient predator do what it does best. Move through the world with a grace and silence we could never hope to achieve. That sense of awe, that recognition of a power both familiar and utterly alien. That's where the dream began. And as you stand there, feeling the night air on your skin, you begin to understand. This world belongs to the night, and the night, it seems, belongs to them. Let's follow where they lead. The shadow you follow doesn't lead you to a back alley mouse hunt. Instead, it seems to draw you toward a softer glow, different from the pinprick stars above. It's the warm, honeyed light of oil lamps, flickering from a doorway that's smaller than a temple gate, but far more inviting. This isn't the palace of a pharaoh. It's a neighborhood shrine, dedicated not to the state gods of sun and order, but to something more personal, more intimate. As you step inside, the scent changes: incense, myrrh, and the faint, clean smell of fresh linen. And there she is, carved from dark, polished wood, seated gracefully on a throne, is a woman with the serene face of a noble, but the alert, pointed ears and sleek head of a cat. In one hand she holds a sacred rattle, a sistrum, whose gentle shake was said to drive away evil spirits. In the other, an aegis, a protective collar. At her feet, sometimes curled, sometimes alert, are small bronze figures of kittens. This is Bastet, or, as she was known in her earliest, terrifying form, Bastet. And her story is one of the greatest glow-ups, or perhaps cool-downs, in mythological history. You see, Bastet didn't start as this benevolent, domestic deity. Her origins are written in claw marks and roars. She was originally a lioness warrior goddess, a fierce protector of the pharaoh and a bringer of vengeance, closely linked to the scorching, destructive power of the sun. She was the Eye of Ra, a weapon unleashed. Think of her as the ancient equivalent of a divine special forces operative, utterly terrifying, unquestionably loyal, and deployed only when things needed to be incinerated. But somewhere along the Nile's long timeline, something shifted. Maybe it was the natural human desire for a protector who didn't also threaten to burn your village down. Maybe it was the daily observation of the small, feline hunters in their midst. Lethal, yes, but also nurturing mothers, graceful companions, and expert pest control. Slowly, the lioness retreated, and the house cat emerged. The sun goddess became a moon goddess. The weapon became a guardian. Now, Bastet embodies everything the Egyptians admired and needed from both the cat and the ideal woman of the household. She is the protector of the home, of women, children, and childbirth. She is the goddess of music, dance, and joy. That sistrum wasn't for heavy metal concerts. It was for festive, soothing rhythms. She is the embodiment of the gentle, life-giving warmth, in contrast to the harsh, murderous heat of the midday sun represented by her lioness form counterpart, Sekhmet. It's a brilliant piece of theological psychology. They took their deepest fears, chaos, disease, vermin, and gave them a face in Sekhmet. Then, they took their deepest hopes, safety, fertility, family, joy, and gave those a face in Bastet. And they made them two sides of the same coin. It's like having a deity who is both a wartime general and a peacetime festival planner, and you just pray you get the festival version. Standing in this humble shrine, it makes perfect sense. The common people couldn't commune daily with the remote, cosmic power of Amunias Ra in his vast, forbidden temple complex. But they could come here. They could bring a small offering of fish, or a precious bit of jewelry shaped like a cat, and whisper their hopes for a healthy baby, for protection from illness, for a little more joy in their hard-lived lives. And as they prayed, a real, live cat might slink past their legs, rubbing against their shins, accepting a scratch behind the ears as its divine due. The line between the goddess and her earthly representative was beautifully, intentionally blurred. To care for a cat was to honor Bastet. To harm one, well, we'll get to that. That's where the story gets seriously consequential. For now, just absorb the atmosphere. The lamplight makes the bronze kittens seem to twitch. You can almost hear the faint, imagined ting-a-ling of the sistrum. And you realize that in this peaceful space, the ancient Egyptians had done something remarkable. They had taken a perfect predator and made it the symbol of everything warm, safe, and good about home. They dreamed of cats not as wild beasts, but as the very guardians of their dreams. And with that thought hanging in the incense-rich air, it's time to meet the people who dedicated their lives to serving these fuzzy little deities. Leaving the intimate glow of the neighborhood shrine, you're drawn deeper into the sacred precinct. The night sounds fade further, replaced by a profound, respectful quiet. You're approaching a larger complex, a temple dedicated to Bastet herself, perhaps at her cult center, Bastet, in the Nile Delta. The air here is different. It carries the scent of water from the nearby canals, mingled with clean straw and a faint, musky animal smell that isn't unpleasant, just alive. This is where the theory of devotion meets the practice. And the practitioners are the temple priests, the keepers of the sacred cats. You see one now, not in some dramatic ceremonial robe, but in a simple, knee-length linen kilt, his head shaved clean for ritual purity. He's moving with a quiet, purposeful efficiency in a moonlit courtyard. His title might be Wab Priest of Bastet, but think of him less as a stern holy man and more as the world's most dedicated and slightly anxious zookeeper/butler for a group of fuzzy, semi-divine tenants. His first duty, even before morning prayers? The feeding round. He's carrying a woven basket, and from it he takes chunks of fresh fish, Nile perch, probably, and places them on clean stone platters. And they come from the shadows of columns, from cozy niches in the sun-warmed walls. A dozen pairs of those luminous eyes appear. Sleek, well-groomed cats of various colors, tawny like the desert, black like the fertile soil, spotted like sunlight on water. They approach without hurry, with a dignified entitlement that says, "Yes, human, you may serve us now." This is the core of his day. Feeding, grooming, tending to any minor injuries. These temple cats aren't wild. They are the beloved, pampered vessels of the goddess's grace. They have names, likely sweet and descriptive ones like Bright Eyes or Nimble One. The priest knows each of their personalities. This one is shy, that one is greedy. This other one loves to nap in a specific sunbeam on the altar itself. Historians believe the cats likely had the run of the temple grounds, a living, purring decoration and a constant, comforting manifestation of the divine. Can you imagine the job review? Must be excellent at ritual purification, have a thorough knowledge of hymns, and be willing to clean up hairballs from sanctified ground. It was a position of honor, but also of immense practical responsibility. And the duties extend beyond feline care. Your priest now moves to a workshop area. Here, under a reed awning, other temple workers are busy. Some are skilled artisans, melting bronze in clay crucibles over hot coals. The molten metal is poured into intricate stone molds, creating thousands of small amulets and statues. Bastet as a cat-headed woman, or simply a sitting cat, its tail curled neatly around its paws. These aren't just souvenirs. These are votive offerings. A pilgrim who has traveled for days to seek Bastet's favor would buy one of these bronze cats, mass-produced with a pious efficiency that would make any modern factory manager proud, and present it to the priests. The priest would then place it in a dedicated catacomb or a chamber within the temple, a permanent physical prayer. It's a thriving spiritual economy, with the temple cats as the living mascots. But there's a softer side, a moment of genuine tenderness you witness. One of the older temple cats, a dignified female with a notch in her ear from some long-ago adventure, approaches the priest. She weaves figure eights through his legs, purring so loudly it's a soft rumble in the quiet courtyard. He smiles, a rare, unguarded expression, and crouches down to stroke her back. For a moment, he's not a priest performing a duty. He's just a man, finding simple, quiet joy in the companionship of a small, warm creature. This, perhaps, is the real secret. The theology was vast and complex, the rituals strict, the industry of devotion enormous. But at the very center of it all was this simple, universal bond, the comfort of a purring cat on your lap. The Egyptians just formalized it, built temples around it, and called it religion. And as the priest rises, his moment of personal peace over, he prepares for the next part of the temple's business, one that would become an industry so vast it boggles the modern mind. Because for every living, purring temple cat, there were thousands upon thousands of followers who wanted a piece of that divinity to take with them into the afterlife. And the temple was more than happy to provide. For a price. The priest's peaceful moment is shattered, not by a sound, but by a distant, rhythmic thumping that seeps through the temple walls. It's not coming from the sacred quarters, but from a sprawling annex on the outskirts of the complex. Following the noise, the scent in the air shifts dramatically. The clean smells of incense and straw are overtaken by something sharper, more astringent, the tang of natron salt, the earthy smell of raw linen, and beneath it all, a faint, sweet-sour organic note. You've arrived at the temple's economic engine, the center of a pious production line that operated on an almost industrial scale, the mummification workshop for cats. Forget the image of careful, reverent embalmers working on a pharaoh for 70 days. This is different. This is volume. The courtyard here is bustling, even in the dim torchlight. In one pen, you see dozens, maybe hundreds, of live cats, mostly kittens and very young adults. They mule and tumble, cared for in a basic fashion, but with a clear, grim purpose. These are not the revered temple cats. These are livestock of the divine, bred specifically for the pilgrimage trade. Nearby, the source of the thumping, workers are pounding vast quantities of natron, a naturally occurring salt mixture, into a fine powder. Others are carefully winding narrow linen strips around small, rigid forms. But the heart of the operation is the embalming table itself. Here, a priest with a more practical, less sentimental demeanor works with swift efficiency. A cat's body, obtained from the breeding pens, or perhaps offered by a pilgrim whose own pet had died, is laid out. The process is respectful, but it's also streamlined. A small incision, the removal of internal organs, which are placed in tiny canopic jars, a miniature version of the human rite, and the meticulous packing of the body cavity with natron and sand. Then, the positioning. The forelegs extended straight down, the hind legs folded up, the tail wrapped around the body, the head often held upright in an eternal, watchful pose. It's then dipped in resin and handed to the wrappers. Within minutes, it's transformed into a neat, linen-wrapped bundle, its shape unmistakably feline. The final touch? A plaster coating and a painted face, big, stylized eyes, pointed ears, sometimes even a little painted-on necklace. The result is a sacred commodity, a mao, the ancient Egyptian word for cat, ready for the afterlife. This is where the pilgrimage to Bastet reached its crescendo. Herodotus, the Greek tourist historian, described festivals where hundreds of thousands gathered, drinking, dancing, and making sacrifices. And the most desired sacrifice was a mummified cat. Pilgrims would buy these pre-packaged mummies from temple vendors, the original gift shop souvenir, if the gift was an eternal soul for a god's favor, and present them to the priests. The priests would then inter them in vast, labyrinthine catacombs dedicated to Bastet. Archaeologists have found these catacombs, some containing millions of these mummies stacked like cordwood. It was a cycle of devotion, supply, and demand that benefited the temple economically and satisfied the deep spiritual longing of the populace. Everyone won. Except, perhaps, the cats bred for the purpose. And here's one of those strange, less-known facts that makes you pause. The sheer scale meant quality control varied. Modern CT scans of cat mummies have revealed a startling secret. Many are perfect, careful interments. But a significant number are, well, fake in a way. Some contain only partial remains, a few bones artfully arranged. Others hold the bones of entirely different animals, like jackals. And some are just bundles of linen and natron with no animal remains at all. Scholars are still debating what this means. Was it outright fraud by a temple looking to maximize profits during peak festival season? Or was it a more nuanced, spiritual practice? The idea that the form and the intent of the offering were as powerful as the contents, a symbolic gesture that was still valid? It's a reminder that ancient belief systems could be as pragmatic and complicated as modern ones, a mix of profound faith and worldly hustle. As you watch another bundle get its painted eyes, you realize this isn't just about love for cats. It's about an entire society trying to buy, wrap, and bury its way into divine grace. And it all started, of course, in the humble Egyptian home. The rhythmic thumping of the mummification workshop fades behind you, replaced once more by the gentle night sounds of the Nile. You leave the temple's industrial-scale piety and drift back into the residential lanes, drawn toward a softer glow, the light of a single oil lamp spilling from the doorway of a modest mud brick house. This is where the cult of the cat truly lived and breathed, not in grand rituals, but in the quiet, daily intimacy of domestic life. Step inside. The air is warm and close, smelling of yesterday's bread, dried herbs hanging from the ceiling, and the faint, clean scent of the whitewashed walls. In the corner, on a simple reed mat, a woman is grinding grain on a saddle quern, her movements a slow, hypnotic rhythm. Curled in the circle of lamplight at her feet is a tawny cat, its sides rising and falling in a contented sleep. A child, a boy of maybe 5, is pretending to be asleep on his own mat, but you can see one eye cracked open, watching the cat with naked adoration. This is the real heart of the story. The temple had its priests, the workshops their mummies, but here, in this room, the cat is neither a symbol nor a commodity. It is a member of the household. Its name might be Mit for its white-pawed feet, or She Who Sings for its persistent meowing at dinner time. Watch the cat stir. It stands, arches its back in a perfect, stretching curve, and pads silently across the compacted earth floor. Its mission is immediate and purposeful. It slinks toward the grain storage bin, a large pottery jar sealed as tightly as possible. But as tightly as possible in 1200 BC, it still leaves gaps for the true scourge of an agricultural society: mice and rats. The cat freezes, becoming a statue except for the very tip of its tail, which twitches once, twice. Then, a blur of motion too fast to follow, a tiny squeak cut abruptly short, and it's over. The cat resumes its dignified walk, the pest removed with terrifying efficiency. The woman at the quern doesn't even look up. She simply smiles a small, private smile. Her family's winter grain store, their survival, is a little bit safer. This practical, life-saving role is the foundation of the cat's status. But the relationship deepens quickly. The boy, seeing the cat's hunt is over, can't resist. He shuffles over and extends a tentative hand. The cat sniffs it, then pushes its head firmly against his fingers, demanding scratches. A loud, rattling purr erupts, filling the small room. The child giggles. The mother looks over, her face softening. In this moment, the cat is a toy, a comfort, a living source of warmth and simple joy. It will sleep on the child's bed, chasing away the chill of the desert night. It will bat at loose threads on the mother's dress as she sews. It is a living, breathing piece of comfort in a hard, uncertain world. And this is where the divine and the domestic become inseparable. To harm this cat isn't just an act of cruelty. It's an offense against Bastet, the protector of this very home. Its death, even of natural causes, would be met with genuine, profound mourning. The family would shave their eyebrows as a sign of grief, a specific, documented practice for a deceased cat. They might then take the body to the temple, hoping to afford a proper mummification, a tiny version of the send-off they'd want for their own family members. The cat's role was cyclical. It protected the physical sustenance, the grain, which nurtured the family, who loved and protected the cat, who honored the goddess. It was a perfect, closed loop of mutual benefit and affection. Archaeologists find this evidence in the most poignant ways, not just in grand tombs, but in domestic settings. The carefully buried skeleton of a cat under the threshold of a house, perhaps a guardian in death as in life. A tiny, crude clay figurine of a cat, made by a child's hands, left as a cherished toy in the corner of a room. This is the truth behind the millions of mummies. Before a cat was a sacred offering, it was a purring presence on a lap at the end of a long day. The Egyptians dreamed of cats because they lived with them, depended on them, and loved them with a depth that they then projected onto the cosmos. And from this safe, warm hearth, the cat's influence was about to set sail, embarking on journeys that would carry its legacy far beyond the Nile's banks. The purring in the mud brick house is replaced by a different, deeper sound, the lap of water against wood and the low creak of ropes under tension. You've been transported from the stable warmth of the hearth to the gentle, rocking motion of a river barge. The air is cooler here, damper, carrying the mineral scent of the Nile and the rich, earthy smell of damp papyrus from the cargo lashed to the deck. We're on a trading vessel, perhaps heading north toward the Mediterranean or south toward Nubia, its broad sail furled for the night as it rides at anchor in a calm channel. And among the coiled ropes and stacked pottery jars, another crew member is on duty. She's a sleek, short-haired cat, her coat a patchwork of browns and blacks that render her nearly invisible in the shadowy clutter of the deck. Her ears are perked, rotating like satellite dishes to catch every skitter and scratch. This is no pampered temple resident or even a beloved house pet. She is a working professional, a vital part of the ship's company. Her job title? Chief Rodent Mitigation Officer. Her payment? Fish heads and a safe, dry spot to sleep. To the sailors, she is as crucial as the rudder. Think about the cargo this boat carries: sacks of precious grain, linen, dried meat, expensive ebony and ivory. A family of rats could ruin a merchant's fortune in a single voyage, gnawing through food stores, soiling fine cloth, and spreading disease in the tight, confined quarters. Poison is risky and could contaminate the food. Traps are feeble against a rodent infestation on the water. But a cat? A cat is a self-replicating, highly motivated, precision pest control system. She patrols the dark, narrow spaces between cargo crates with a silent authority no human could ever muster. Her mere presence, her scent, acts as a deterrent. The sailors believe she does more than just catch mice. She wards off the spirits of decay and misfortune that could sink a ship as surely as a storm. You see one of the crew now, a grizzled old sailor with forearms like twisted rope. He's finishing his watch. Instead of heading straight for his sleeping mat, he pauses, reaches into a small clay pot, and pulls out a choice piece of salted fish. He makes a soft clicking sound with his tongue. The shadow detaches itself from the mast and flows toward him. She accepts the offering daintily, then, in a gesture of profound professional courtesy, rubs her cheek against his leathery ankle before disappearing back into her patrol route. There's a deep, mutual respect here. She keeps their livelihood safe. They provide her with a life of adventure and endless hunting grounds. It's the perfect symbiosis. This maritime role helps explain how cats began to spread. Egyptian trade networks stretched across the Mediterranean to Crete, Cyprus, and the Levant. What better gift or good luck charm for a foreign trading partner than one of these expert, divine protectors? A cat on a ship was a living token of Bastet's favor, ensuring not just a vermin-free voyage but also divine protection against the chaos of the open sea, which the Egyptians feared as much as any desert storm. The cat, already a symbol of the safe, ordered home, became the guardian of the moving, vulnerable home on the water. And here's a lesser-known, wonderfully practical nautical fact. Sailors likely observed something profound about their feline shipmates. Cats are famously sensitive to changes in atmospheric pressure. Their behavior can become restless or anxious before a storm hits. To a superstitious sailor watching his ship's cat suddenly stop grooming and stare fixedly at the horizon, ears flat, that wasn't just odd behavior. That was a divine messenger, a tiny, furry barometer gifted by Bastet herself, giving them early warning to reef the sails or seek shelter. So the cat wasn't just controlling physical pests. She was helping them navigate metaphysical ones, interpreting the moods of the gods of wind and water. On the rocking deck, under a sky vast with stars, the line between a skilled hunter and a sacred oracle was paper-thin. And this deep, practical reverence would soon be tested, in the starkest terms possible, back on dry land. Because the law of the land reflected the divinity of the cat with terrifying seriousness. The gentle rocking of the Nile barge solidifies into the unmoving stone of a public square. The time is now daylight, harsh and glaring, a stark contrast to our nocturnal wanderings. The air is thick, not with incense or river mist, but with the tension of a gathered crowd. You're in a marketplace, but no one is bartering. All eyes are fixed on a central platform where a local magistrate, a stern man with an official seal around his neck, stands before a trembling figure. The accused is a man whose clothing marks him as a foreigner, a Greek merchant, perhaps, or a Nubian trader. His face is a mask of confusion and dawning horror. And laid on a linen cloth before the magistrate is a small, still form, a tawny cat, its body limp. The story, pieced together from the hushed, angry whispers of the crowd, is one of tragic accident. The foreigner's wagon, loaded with pottery, was maneuvering through the narrow street. The cat, maybe chasing a lizard, darted under the wheels. A single, fatal crunch. An accident, yes. But in Egypt, there was no such thing as an accidental killing of a cat. The law was absolute and draconian. The Greek historian Diodorus Siculus would later record it with astonishment. To kill a cat, even accidentally, was a capital offense. Watch the scene unfold. The crowd isn't just angry. They are incensed, their faces contorted with a genuine, religious fury. This isn't about the loss of a pet. This is about a strike against the divine order, an insult to Bastet that could bring her wrath down upon the entire community. Women wail, tearing at their garments as if in personal mourning. Men shout for immediate justice. The magistrate raises his hands for silence, his own expression grave. The foreigner tries to plead, offering money, reparations, anything. His words are swallowed by the roar of the crowd. The protection of the cat was a societal imperative so deeply ingrained that mercy for a stranger was unthinkable. It was a matter of collective security. And here is where the historical accounts present us with a grim, debated anecdote. Diodorus tells us that in such cases, a mob would often form and the offender would be seized and killed on the spot, regardless of official procedure. Sometimes, it is said, they would even throw the body of the perpetrator into the Nile. The historian notes, with a tone of Greco-Roman bewilderment, that even if the pharaoh himself tried to pardon the person, he might fail against the will of the people. The authority of the state bowed to the sacred law of the cat. Now, modern scholars debate the frequency and literal truth of these mob executions. Was it always a death sentence, or could a truly accidental case result in a massive fine or exile? The records are sparse, but the core truth is undeniable. The cat's life, in the eyes of the law and the public, was of incalculable value, often placed above that of a human outsider. Standing in that square, feeling the sun beat down and the collective outrage vibrate through the air, you understand the full weight of the Egyptian dream. The cat was more than protected, it was untouchable. Its safety was woven into the legal and spiritual fabric of the nation. This absolute sanctity had a practical side. Of course, protecting the creature that protected the grain was ultimately an act of economic and societal survival. But it had ascended far beyond the practical. It was a sacred principle. To harm a cat was to invite chaos, to side with Apophis the serpent against the ordered light of Ra. It was the ultimate crime. As the unfortunate foreigner is led away by temple guards, for his own protection from the crowd as much as for punishment, the mood shifts. The cat's body is treated with utmost reverence. A priest of Bastet arrives and carefully wraps it in fine linen. It will be mummified with full rites, perhaps at the state's expense since its death was a matter of public import. The crowd's anger turns to mourning, a communal grief for the lost sliver of divinity. The incident will be talked about for weeks. And for you, the observer, it casts every previous scene in a new light. The playful kitten in the house, the prowling hunter on the ship, the pampered resident of the temple, all were wrapped in an invisible, inviolable shield of law and belief. They lived in a bubble of absolute safety, a privilege granted to no other creature. And this reverence wasn't born just from their utility or their cuteness, but from their starring role in the very drama of the cosmos. For in the Egyptian night, the cat wasn't just a guardian of homes and granaries. It was the creature believed to ride with the sun god himself into the underworld, to fight the battle upon which all dawns depended. The harsh sunlight of the marketplace dissolves, not into darkness, but into a deeper, more profound and terrifying gloom. You are no longer on the earthly plane. The air is gone, replaced by a thick, silent, suffocating absence. You are in the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, riding in the solar bark, a vessel of woven light and shadow, with the sun god Ra himself. It is the perilous, 12-hour journey he must make each night to be reborn at dawn. And the enemy is Apophis, the colossal serpent of chaos, who waits in the black waters to swallow the boat, the god, and all of creation with him. The only sound is the rhythmic dip of celestial oars. The only light comes from Ra's dimmed solar disk. And on the prow of the boat, eyes gleaming with a fierce, reflected glow, is a gigantic cat. This is not Bastet. This is a far more primal entity, often called the Great Cat of Heliopolis. It is a manifestation of Ra's own protective power. In some texts, it is the god Ra himself in a feline form. In others, it is a separate guardian spirit. Its size is unimaginable, as tall as a pyramid, its muscles coiled like river currents under a coat that shines like polished obsidian. It is the ultimate predator, facing the ultimate chaos. As the bark glides into the deepest trench of the night, Apophis strikes. A mountain of scaly, coiled darkness rears from the void, jaws wide enough to eclipse stars. And the cat attacks. There is no elegant pounce here. This is a battle of cosmic proportions. The great cat seizes the serpent in its claws and fangs, a struggle depicted in tomb paintings and papyri with startling violence. In a famous vignette from the Book of the Dead, the cat is shown decapitating Apophis with a knife. But in the older, raw myth, the fight is more direct, tooth and claw against scale and void. It is a fight that happens every single night, a perpetual, grinding battle to keep the machinery of the universe, sunrise, harvest, life itself, on track. The cat is the champion of Ma'at, order, truth, balance, against Isfit, chaos, lies, disorder. Now, think about what this does to the Egyptian psyche. Every evening, as dusk fell and shadows grew long, they knew this battle was commencing in the unseen world. And every morning, when the sun's edge peeked over the eastern mountains, it was proof positive that the great cat had won again. The domestic cat snoozing on your wall, with its claws and teeth and lethal hunting skill, was a tiny, physical echo of that cosmic defender. Its ability to kill snakes, a common and deadly nuisance in Egypt, wasn't just handy. It was a miniature reenactment of the divine drama. When a house cat dispatched a cobra in the yard, it wasn't just protecting the family. It was performing a sacred ritual, a tiny victory for order over chaos right in the home. This connection between the domestic and the divine is mind-bending. The same creature that curled up on a child's chest, purring a gentle lullaby, was also the mythical beast standing between the world and eternal darkness. It tied the most intimate moment of safety to the most vast existential battle. This is why the reverence was so deep, so visceral. They weren't just projecting human traits onto an animal. They saw in the cat's very nature, its nocturnal prowess, its silent movement, its deadly efficiency, the literal qualities of a cosmic savior. The cat in the alley wasn't just a good mouser. It was a veteran of the wars in the Duat, taking a night off. As the vision of the solar bark fades, the cosmic cat's triumphant stance against the dissolving serpent lingers in your mind. With the dawn secured once more, the Egyptians could go about their daily lives. And for the elite, that meant adorning themselves with the power and protection of their feline champion. The symbol of the cosmic victory was about to become the height of earthly fashion. The cosmic void of the Duat recedes, replaced by the warm, perfumed air of a wealthy home's private chamber. The first rays of that hard-won dawn filter through a high, narrow window, illuminating a scene of meticulous preparation. You are in the dressing room of a noblewoman. The battles of gods and serpents are far away. Here, the divine is being woven into the very fabric of daily elegance. And the motif, the silent power she wishes to harness as she faces the world, is everywhere. It is the cat. Her personal servant, a young girl with careful hands, opens an intricately carved ivory cosmetics box. Inside, nestled in a bed of linen, are the tools of beauty and protection. The most prominent is the coal jar. It is not a plain pot. It is a sitting cat, crafted from faience, a glazed ceramic that shines a brilliant, watery blue-green. The cat's elongated body forms the container, its head the lid. To apply the dark liner that will shield her eyes from the sun's glare and ward off evil spirits, the noblewoman will literally anoint herself from the body of Bastet. The coal stick itself might be topped with a tiny silver cat. As she leans toward her bronze mirror, she is not just applying makeup. She is invoking the goddess's all-seeing, protective gaze. Now, the servant brings forth the jewelry. A heavy necklace of gold and carnelian rests on a tray. The central pectoral piece? A stylized cat, its body formed of gold wire, its eyes inlaid with lapis lazuli. The clasp of her bracelet is a cat's head. A ring fits onto her finger, the bezel a tiny, finely detailed cat seated and washing a paw. Even the handle of her hairpin terminates in a crouching feline form. Every piece serves a dual purpose: to display immense wealth and to cloak the wearer in the cat's sacred attributes: grace, protection, fertility, and a touch of its perceived cunning. To adorn oneself with cats was to announce that you walked with the favor of Bastet and carried the subtle strength of the great cat of Heliopolis. But the influence slinks beyond precious metals. Look at her furniture. The leg of her stool might be carved in the shape of a cat's leg and paw. On the walls, frescoes show slender, graceful cats sitting under chairs or accompanying their mistresses on bird-hunting trips in the marshes. Even her leisure is feline adjacent. She might play a board game called Mehen, named for a coiled serpent god, the board itself a spiral resembling a coiled snake. While not directly a cat game, the symbolism is eerily familiar, a game of strategy mimicking the cosmic battle, perhaps played with lion or cat-headed pieces. The cat isn't just a pet. It is the aesthetic and spiritual currency of the upper class, a living good luck charm rendered in art and fashion. And here's a delightful, lesser-known fact about this feline fashion. It was likely shockingly relatable. While the noblewoman's cat-shaped coal pot was priceless faience, a poorer woman might have a simple clay version with the same form. The idea was accessible to all. Archaeologists find these small, cheap cat amulets everywhere, in workers' villages, in tombs of children, in market ruins. They were mass-produced, like the bronze votive offerings, for everyday people. The wealthy expressed their devotion in gold and ivory. The common people expressed theirs in baked mud and faded paint. But the intention was identical, to keep a piece of that silent, protective power close to the skin. It was a democratization of divine defense. The noblewoman, checking her reflection one last time, catches the eye of her actual, living cat, a sleek creature with a silver collar, stretched out on a sunny windowsill. A silent understanding passes between them. The symbol and the living reality, existing in perfect, contented harmony. But this perfect harmony, this absolute reign of the cat, was not destined to last forever. The world was changing, and new gods were sailing down the Nile. The cat's divine status was about to face its greatest threat not from chaos serpents, but from a radical shift in human belief. The noblewoman's perfumed chamber fades, and you are back under the open sky, but not the benevolent night of the Nile. This is the deep, living darkness of the reed-choked marshes at the river's edge. The air hums with insects and the guttural chorus of frogs. You are here to observe a masterclass in silent survival, to understand the raw, natural genius that inspired all the gold amulets and cosmic myths. Because before the cat was a god, it was a perfect predator. And in the shadows, one is at work. She is a wild ancestor, a lithe African wildcat, Felis sylvestris libica, the very progenitor of the domestic cat. Or perhaps she is one of the early, semi-domesticated ones, living on the fringe of human settlement. Her coat is a tawny, thick tabby, perfect camouflage in the dry reeds. She moves not with steps, but with flows of muscle, each placement of her paw deliberate, soundless. She is the embodiment of patient energy. For 20 minutes, she is a statue, only the very tip of her tail betraying her intense focus. Then, a barely perceptible shift in the wind, a rustle a human ear would never register. In a movement that seems to defy physics, she coils and springs, a blur of concentrated force. A splash, a brief struggle, and she emerges from the reeds with a large, water-loving rodent in her jaws. The hunt is efficient, bloodless in its precision, and utterly successful. This is what the ancient Egyptians saw and revered. Every aspect of the cat's biology seemed to them a divine gift, a set of superpowers explained by mythology. Those huge, light-gathering eyes that could see in the near-total darkness? Clearly, they contained the light of the moon or the last embers of the sun god, allowing them to patrol Ra's nighttime realm. Their vertical pupils, narrowing to slits against the glare. Surely that was how they could stare directly at the divine solar disk without being blinded. Their retractable claws, hidden weapons, like a god's secret power, revealed only when needed for a sacred battle. Their uncanny silence, the ability to move between worlds, the physical and the spiritual, without disturbing the veil. And their voice, that haunting, flexible range from a nurturing purr to a terrifying yowl. The Egyptians must have been mesmerized. The purr symbolized contentment, the gentle aspect of Bastet. The spine-chilling caterwaul of a cat fight in the night. That was the sound of the great cat battling Apophis in the duet, the clash of order and chaos echoing into the mortal world. Even their reproductive efficiency. A female cat can have multiple litters a year, aligned perfectly with Bastet's role as a goddess of fertility and the protection of mothers. In the cat, the Egyptians saw a creature that was perfectly adapted to bridge all the dichotomies of their world: day and night, life and death, fertility and predation, domestic harmony and wild power. Modern science gives us a cooler, but no less impressive, explanation. The African wildcat is a solitary, territorial, and highly adaptable obligate carnivore. It is naturally curious but wary, a combination that likely led it to human granaries, where rodents were plentiful. Its social flexibility allowed it to tolerate humans and other cats in close quarters, a prerequisite for domestication. But the Egyptians didn't need the science. They witnessed the effect. A single cat could secure a food store. Its presence meant the difference between a harvest saved and a harvest lost to vermin. Its survival skills were so superior, so mystical in their efficiency, that attributing them to divinity wasn't a leap of faith. It was the only logical conclusion for a culture that saw the sacred in every natural force. They weren't worshipping the cat in spite of its wild nature. They were worshipping it because of it. The killer in the marsh and the purring creature on the pillow were one and the same, and that seamless unity was the source of its power. As the wildcat melts back into the reeds with her prize, you understand the foundation has been laid. The biological marvel has been recognized, deified, and woven into law and daily life. But such a potent cultural force could not be contained. The cat, having conquered the Egyptian cosmos, was now ready to be packaged and exported to begin its conquest of the rest of the world, starting with the rising power that was quickly falling in love with all things Egyptian, Rome. The whispering reeds of the marsh solidify into the creaking planks of a much larger ship, and the scent of the Nile mud is overwhelmed by the salt tang of the open sea. You're no longer on a humble river barge, but aboard a sturdy Roman merchant vessel, its hold stuffed with papyrus rolls, jars of incense, and sacks of precious grain. The journey from Alexandria to Ostia is long and treacherous, and amidst this valuable cargo, nestled in a specially woven reed basket lined with soft linen, is Egypt's most intriguing and living export, a pair of cats. These are not working mousers for the crew. These are elite immigrants. They are sleek, elegant animals, likely with distinctive markings, perhaps the classic Egyptian mouse spotted coat. They are a gift, or more accurately, a supremely expensive purchase for a wealthy Roman patrician eager to display his sophistication and connections. In Rome, everything Egyptian is in vogue: obelisks, cults of Isis, granite statues. And now, the ultimate accessory, a living, breathing symbol of the mysterious Nile. The cat is about to go from a sacred being to a status symbol. Picture their arrival in a Roman villa. The stark, geometric architecture is nothing like the organic mud brick of an Egyptian home. The light is different, the sounds are different. The cats are wary, hiding under a silk-draped couch. The Roman family gathers, speaking in Latin, their tones a mix of awe and curiosity. To them, these creatures are exotic marvels. They've heard tales from historians and traders of the Egyptians' fanatical devotion. They know these animals are connected to the popular, if controversial, cult of Isis, who had absorbed some of Bastet's attributes. Owning one is like owning a piece of that ancient, mystical glamour. It's the ancient world equivalent of importing a rare, designer breed, a living conversation piece. But the Romans, being relentlessly practical, would not have kept them solely as decor. The villa has a grain store, too, and mice are a universal problem. So, the Egyptian cats quickly prove their worth beyond their mystique. They are, after all, still cats. Their lethal efficiency in the villa's storerooms would have been noted with approval. The Roman writer Pliny the Elder, that encyclopedia of everything, and often, nonsense, would later note the usefulness of cats for controlling pests. But the Roman relationship with them was fundamentally different. There was no divine aura, no capital punishment for harming one. They were valued animals, yes, useful, fashionable, even beloved pets for some. But they were not gods. They could be bought, sold, traded, or disposed of without triggering a religious crisis. This was the cat's first major cultural translation, from deity to commodity and companion. And here's a fascinating, lesser-known twist in the story. The cat's spread northward was likely slow. While the Egyptians had deified them for millennia, evidence suggests cats were still relatively uncommon in northern Europe for centuries after they became chic in Rome. The Romans probably facilitated their spread throughout their empire, but it was a gradual creep, not an invasion. And without the weight of Egyptian theology, the cat's image began to morph. In some northern myths, cats were linked to fertility goddesses like Freya, whose chariot was pulled by them, an echo, perhaps, of Bastet that had traveled along trade routes. But the absolute, sacred inviolability was gone. The cat was now just an animal, albeit a special one. Its destiny was no longer tied solely to the pharaohs and their gods, but to the whims of emperors, merchants, and the general practicality of everyday people across an empire. Watching the Egyptian cats cautiously explore the mosaic floor of the Roman villa, you see a pivotal moment. They have left the only civilization that would ever worship them. They are ambassadors without a portfolio, their divine passports no longer valid. Their power now rests in their beauty, their utility, and the lingering ghost of their former glory. And back in their homeland, that glory was facing an existential threat far more profound than any Roman practicality. A new, uncompromising belief was rising, one that had no room for cat-headed goddesses or animal cults. The age of Bastet was nearing its twilight. The cool, elegant lines of the Roman villa dissolve into a hotter, dustier, and more tense atmosphere. You are back in Egypt, but the world you knew is fading. The year is now sometime in the 4th or 5th century AD. The air still smells of the Nile, but now it also carries the scent of melting beeswax candles and old parchment, not temple incense. The great temples to the old gods are falling silent. Edicts from distant Christian emperors have outlawed pagan worship. The once celebrated festivals of Bastet are now forbidden, her temples either abandoned, converted into churches, or dismantled stone by stone to build new, stark basilicas dedicated to a single, human-shaped god who expressly forbade the worship of graven images, especially ones with animal heads. Walk through the ruins of the temple at Bastet now. The catacombs, once bustling with pilgrims buying mummies, are sealed and silent. The statue of Bastet in her inner sanctum lies toppled, her cat's head sheared from her human shoulders by zealous hands. The sacred cats that once roamed the precinct are gone, scattered, driven out, or killed. The new religion viewed the old ways not just as incorrect, but as demonic. The intricate, animal-linked pantheon was seen as a playground for devils. And the cat, so deeply entwined with a pagan goddess, was caught in the theological crossfire. Its image began to tarnish. From a symbol of protection and joy, it slowly morphed, in the Christian mind, into a creature associated with witchcraft, lust, and darkness. The independent, nocturnal nature that the Egyptians saw as divine, the new order viewed with deep suspicion. This transition wasn't overnight, and it wasn't universal. In farming villages, cats undoubtedly continued their practical work, and people likely still felt affection for them. But the official, state-sponsored, all-encompassing cloak of sanctity was ripped away. The legal penalties for killing a cat vanished. The industry of mummification ground to a total and final halt. The dream, the specific, glorious Egyptian dream of the cat as a cornerstone of the cosmic and domestic order, was over. The goddess had been evicted, and her sacred animal was left to fend for itself in a world that no longer understood its old language. And here is a poignant, archaeological postscript to this fall: the fate of those millions of mummified cats. With the end of the cult, their resting places were forgotten. They were no longer sacred relics. They were just odd, ancient curiosities. Centuries later, in the 19th century, when European archaeologists and, less scrupulously, fertilizer merchants discovered the vast catacombs, they saw not a sacred necropolis but a resource. In one of history's most jarring acts of cultural dissonance, tons of cat mummies were dug up, shoveled into sacks, and shipped to England to be ground into fertilizer for farmers' fields. Others were sold as cheap tourist trinkets. An 1890 shipping manifest from Egypt records a single order of 180,000 cat mummies, weighing about 19 tons, destined to be turned into plant food. It's a stark and brutal full-circle journey, from revered divine vessel to forgotten artifact to literal manure. Scholars still debate the ethics and symbolism of this modern-day destruction, a final, unwitting insult to a belief system already long dead. Standing in the ruined temple, the silence is absolute. The sistrum is stilled. The only movement is a desert lizard skittering over a stone carved with a faint, eroded image of a cat. The empire of the cat goddess had fallen, but the creature itself, resilient and adaptable, survived. It no longer had temples, but it still had homes. It no longer had priests, but it still had people who, despite new doctrines, couldn't help but appreciate a purring companion on a cold night or a skilled hunter in the barn. The cat's biological brilliance outlasted its theological status. And as you leave the ruins, a single, skinny descendant of those temple cats might slink across your path, a ghost of its former deified self, but very much alive. Its journey through human history was now a secular one, but its ancient, Egyptian-shaped echo was permanently encoded in its genes and in the collective memory of the world it helped civilize. We're about to trace that genetic signature from the sands of the Nile to the cozy couch in your living room. The oppressive silence of the ruined temple is replaced by the crisp, dry air of a 19th-century archaeological dig. The year is 1888, and you're standing at the edge of a gaping hole in the Egyptian desert, not far from the village of Beni Hassan. The site is buzzing, not with reverence, but with industry. British Egyptologists in pith helmets direct local workers who are hauling not gold or statues, but bundles, countless, dusty linen bundles, out of a cavernous underground tomb. This is a cat necropolis, one of those vast repositories for the mummified offerings to Bastet. But the men aren't treating them as sacred. They're cataloging, counting, and crating them with the clinical detachment of accountants. A newspaper reporter on site scribbles notes, his headline already forming. A shipment of mummies. 19 tons of feline remains ordered for English agriculture. Watch as a worker, his hands caked in ancient dust, casually tosses a mummy bundle onto a growing pile. The linen wrapping, once carefully applied by a priest in the name of eternity, splits open. A small, brown skull and a jumble of delicate bones spill into the sand. No one gasps. No one mourns. This is a commodity. The mummies are about to be loaded onto steamers, sent to Liverpool, and sold by the ton to be pulverized into fertilizer. It was a cheap source of phosphates. In one grimly poetic transaction, the physical remains of what was once considered divine were used to nurture English turnips and roses. Some were also sold as curiosities. You could buy a cat mummy as a souvenir for a few pence. Victorian ladies might even host unwrapping parties for entertainment, a grotesque parody of the ancient rituals. This period represents the absolute nadir of the cat's historical journey, from God to garbage. The modern world, in its rush for progress and its colonial sense of superiority, had completely failed to understand the spiritual world it was plundering. The Egyptians saw these mummies as eternal vessels for a sacred spirit. The 19th century saw them as industrial feedstock or party favors. It's a stark lesson in how the meaning of an object, or a life, is entirely dependent on the culture interpreting it. Historians and archaeologists today view this episode with a mixture of horror and academic fascination. The sheer scale of the destruction means we lost untold information about breeding practices, feline diseases, and religious variations. It was a catastrophic loss of historical data, driven by sheer utility. But amidst this crude exploitation, a sliver of scientific curiosity was born. A few of those Victorian researchers, perhaps feeling a pang of something beyond utility, began to actually study the mummies instead of just grinding them up. They unwrapped them carefully, examined the bones, and made the first tentative comparisons with modern cat skeletons. In doing so, they planted the seed for a question that would only be answered with 21st century technology. What is the genetic legacy of the ancient Egyptian cat? Did all those venerated temple and household cats leave a distinct mark on the pets that now sleep on our beds? The answer, as we're beginning to understand, is both yes and no in fascinating ways. The dream of the Egyptians didn't just vanish. It was written, in part, in a code of DNA that was waiting to be read. And as the last sacks of mummy fertilizer are hauled away, the focus shifts from the brutal economics of the 19th century to the delicate, invisible science of the modern era, where the story continues in the very cells of every cat that blinks slowly at you from a sunny windowsill. The dust of the 19th century dig settles, and the scene sharpens into the sterile, humming quiet of a modern genetics lab. The rough sacks and broken mummies are gone, replaced by pristine trays holding tiny samples of bone powder, meticulously extracted from the few cat mummies that survived the fertilizer trade and ended up in museum drawers. A scientist, clad in a white coat, is pipetting a clear liquid into a sequencing machine. We are no longer looking at symbols or statues. We are reading the literal biological blueprint. The question on the table: what is the direct, genetic link between the cats of the pharaohs and the cat currently hogging your pillow? The results, when they started coming in over the last decade, have been revolutionary and surprisingly nuanced. Early studies extracted mitochondrial DNA, passed down the maternal line, from mummies dating from the late period, around 600 BCE, all the way up to the 4th century AD. They compared it to the DNA of modern cats from across Europe, Africa, and Asia. And they found something fascinating. The genetic signature of the Egyptian cats was not dominant in the worldwide feline population. Instead, it formed a distinct, powerful branch. The modern domestic cat's family tree shows two major lineages. One, the Near Eastern lineage, spread early from the Fertile Crescent with the first farmers. The other, the more influential Egyptian lineage, exploded across the Mediterranean and Europe later, likely thanks to those very Roman trading ships and the Phoenician vessels before them. So, your cat is probably not a direct, purebred descendant of a Bastet temple cat, but there's an extremely high chance it carries a significant chunk of Egyptian feline DNA. The cats of Egypt, through their prestige and deliberate export, massively contributed to the genetic pool of cats across the Roman Empire and, eventually, the world. They were the supermodels, the influencers, the desirable imports whose genes became fashionable and widespread. Think of it not as a replacement, but as a powerful and glamorous addition to the existing feline genome. And here's the delightful, less-known twist that genetics has revealed: the ancient Egyptian cats, based on their skeletal structure and these DNA studies, weren't all that different physically from today's typical short-haired magas. They were likely slender, athletic animals with a mackerel tabby pattern, the natural camouflage of their wild ancestors. The specific spotted coat of the modern Egyptian Mao breed is probably a later development. The sacred cats of Bastet looked, for the most part, like the clever, sleek street cats you might still see in Cairo today. Their divinity was in their role, not in a specially bred form. They were elegant, efficient working animals who got promoted to the celestial board of directors by the human imagination. This genetic thread ties everything together. The practical marsh hunter, the beloved house protector, the venerated temple icon, and the prized Roman commodity, they were all the same biological entity, slowly spreading its DNA across continents. The Egyptian dream wasn't a hallucination. It was a perception of a real creature's extraordinary qualities, so intense that it reshaped how that creature moved across the globe. The worship has ended, but the biological and cultural legacy is everywhere. Every time a cat does something that seems to us perfectly, mysteriously cat-like, that silent stare, that sudden burst of manic energy at 3 a.m., that affectionate headbutt, we are witnessing behaviors that, thousands of years ago, convinced an entire civilization they were in the presence of something divine. The genome is the last and most enduring Egyptian artifact, a living heir to Bastet's legacy. And it brings us to our final, quiet question, as we prepare to leave history behind and return to our own, cat-filled present. Why, after all this time, does that ancient dream still hold such power over us? The cool, digital glow of the genetics lab dissolves, and you are back. The air is your own air. The light is the soft, perhaps blue-tinged glow of your own screen in a darkened room. The hum is your fan, or the distant whisper of traffic, or the profound silence of a sleeping house. The journey along the Nile, through temples, homes, ships, and laboratories, is complete. We have followed the paw prints from the marshes to the cosmos and back again. Now, We arrive at the final, quiet mystery. Why does the Egyptian dream of the cat still resonate so deeply with us? Here, centuries and civilizations removed from the cult of Bastet? It's because, at its core, the Egyptian relationship with cats wasn't really about religion. Not in the way we think of it. It was about recognizing a perfect partnership. They observed a small creature that solved a fundamental human problem, pests, asked for little in return, and offered an unexpected bonus, comfort. In its purr, they found a vibration that soothed anxiety. In its graceful independence, they saw a model of self-contained power. In its affectionate rub against a leg, they felt a bond that required no words. They simply took all these profound, practical, and emotional benefits and projected them onto the grandest canvas they had, their mythology. They made the relationship sacred to honor its depth. We do the same thing today. We don't call them gods. We call them family. We don't build them temples, though the internet comes close. We build them elaborate climbing trees and buy them self-warming beds. We don't mummify them, but we memorialize them in photos and grieve them deeply. The language has changed, but the chords it strikes are identical. The cat still represents a manageable wildness in our overly domesticated lives. Its 3 a.m. zoom eyes are our own tiny, safe encounter with chaos. Its contented purr on our lap is a tactile, living affirmation of peace. It is both a connection to the untamed natural world and the ultimate symbol of domestic coziness. The Egyptians just had the clarity to formally deify that perfect contradiction. So, when you feel that familiar weight settle on your feet tonight, or hear the delicate tap-tap-tap of claws on a hardwood floor in the dark, you are participating in the end of a very long, unbroken story. You are feeling the echo of the Nile's night breeze, the shadow of the solar bark, the whisper of a priest's prayer over a tiny mummy. The dream of the cat is the dream of a perfect companion, a protector that asks for no praise, a comfort that demands no explanation, a piece of the mysterious, beautiful wild that agrees to live with us, and, in doing so, makes our homes feel like sanctuaries. The Egyptians understood that this was magic. They called it divinity. We call it love. It is, essentially, the same thing. Now, let the images soften. Let the grand temples and bustling markets blur at the edges, like a dream upon waking. The stars over Thebes fade into the gentle texture of your own ceiling. The scent of lotus and incense is replaced by whatever calm, familiar smell belongs to your room tonight. The story is over, but the feeling it carried, that sense of quiet companionship, of a small, warm presence sharing your space, that remains. Breathe slowly. Feel the weight of your body supported completely by your bed. Listen to the rhythm of your own breath, or to the steady, gentle hum of the fan, like a modern, mechanical version of the Nile's eternal flow. There is no past to decipher, no history to analyze. There is only this moment, this peace, this darkness that is no longer empty, but full of the quiet echoes of a story well told. Whatever worries you carried today, whatever lists await tomorrow, let them drift away on that soft, soundless current. You are safe. You are still. You are connected to a long, unbroken line of humans who found, in the simple presence of a small, graceful creature, a reason to believe in protection, in joy, in something greater than themselves. That belief is a lullaby older than nations. Let your eyelids grow heavy. Let your thoughts dissolve into the comfortable, wordless dark. Imagine, if you wish, the gentle vibration of a purr, felt more than heard, a frequency of pure contentment that needs no era, no translation. It is simply a signal that all is well, that the night is for resting, that you are not alone in the quiet. Drift on that feeling. Deeper now. Let go of the shore of wakefulness. The dream of the cat is over. Now, it is time for your own. End of script. Sweet dreams.